Welcome to the Endgame Finance. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about 3 companies that will most likely be bankrupt within 12 months. If you hold shares in any of these companies, you should probably sell them. I'm not recommending you guys sell them. I'm just saying there's some bad things coming up for these 3 companies. So let's get into it. First company I'm going to talk to you guys about is Polestar. Polestar is an EV startup. They are a joint production between a Chinese company and a Swedish company, and most of their vehicles are actually built inside China. Now, this is a huge disadvantage for these guys because vehicles produced in China are not eligible for tax incentives in the United States. $7,500 tax credit will not be obtainable if vehicle is not produced, if it's not manufactured in Northern Americas. So these guys will most likely see a collapse in demand because people will not really want to purchase a more expensive vehicle if they can buy something like a Tesla or a Rivian with a $7,500 discount. So if you look at these guys, if you look at the stock price of Polestar, these guys are down to about $1 from peak of almost $6 from end of 2021. So their stock price has pretty much collapsed. Their revenues are $435 million for the Q3 of 2022. They will take a loss of about $200 million on that. As you can see, there's a trend where losses are constantly increasing. So the more these guys produce, the more they build, the more they lose. And their only hope is to reach scale, to reach a manufacturing scale where pretty much they start to edge out a small operating profit. But that doesn't seem likely. If you look at their models, Polestar 1 is a almost $160,000 vehicle. This car is very similar to Tesla. And if you're gonna buy a vehicle, you might as well go with Tesla because they have a supercharging network across the United States. So you don't have to worry about running out of juice. You don't have to use third-party charging stations like you would have to with Polestar. So these guys are pretty much finished. Like pretty much Tesla has taken all their market share. Buyers are not buying because they're not getting the $75 tax incentive. And there is a lack of a charging network for this vehicle. There's also a huge lack of brand awareness. Pretty much nobody's heard of Polestar in the United States. So these guys are not looking that well. In my opinion, they will most likely be bankrupt by the end of 2023. Now, a second company I want to talk to you guys about is Carvana. Carvana is down 98% year to date. Now, Carvana pretty much grew themselves into a bankruptcy. They grew so drastically that they're pretty much going to run out of cash because they grew themselves into an unsustainable business. You can see their quarterly unit sales are in hundreds of thousands for the last few quarters. That's actually very impressive until you look at their gross profit per unit. Now, gross profit per unit is actually declining, which is a really bad sign. It means they're getting a lot less profit on each vehicle they sell. And at the current level of 3,500, they're pretty much losing money on every single sale they make. If you look at their cash flows for 9 months ended of 2022, they lost about $1.4 billion. This is not good because they only have about $477 million in cash remaining. So they will most likely run out of money at some point during Q2, Q3 of 2023. If you look at their cash and cash assets, it's decreasing also as well. It decreased $160 million for last quarter. So at this pace, like I said, they will most likely be bankrupt by Q2, Q3 of 2023. And last statistics I want to show you about these guys is they actually have a negative net income margin. So like I said, every vehicle they sell, they lose about 15% of the total sale price. So their losses are pretty staggering. And with these losses, they will go bankrupt probably, like I said, within a few months. So third stock I want to talk to you guys about is FuboTV. Fubo will most likely be bankrupt by this time next year. They only have about 1.2 million subscribers. And this is pretty low considering that Amazon Prime Video has about 200 million users. Netflix has about 195 million. HBO Max, Disney and Hulu, 70, 45. Apple TV, 40 million users. So as you can see, these guys are just a small fish in the big pond, and they will most likely not be able to survive. If you look at their Q3 2022 results and guidance, they are generating around $225 million of revenues, but they have a negative margin of almost 40%. That means for every dollar they make, they lose about $1.50, which is pretty horrible. That is not a sustainable business model. As you can see, their net loss on 225 million was around 153 million. So these guys will most likely run out of cash Q3, Q4 next year, and will either restructure, which is a fancy word for bankruptcy, or just outright declare bankruptcy. As you can see, they are in pretty bad situation. One of their niche focuses that was working out fairly well for the last quarter or two is actually their live streaming sports. They were one of the dominant players, but right now YouTube has acquired the NFL rights, NFL streaming rights. I believe Amazon has acquired streaming rights for baseball, Apple for soccer. So pretty much everybody has grabbed onto live streaming, and these guys will be squeezed out because they will not be able to afford any streaming rights for live events, and their growth will most likely collapse. As you can see, they have about 200 million in cash, so they will be burning through that in the next few quarters. Like I said, they are heavily in the negative on their margin, so within the few months expect them to just declare bankruptcy outright. So that's pretty much it. We went over 3 companies that will most likely go bankrupt in 2023. We have Polestar, an electric vehicle startup that is just burning cash and will run out of money pretty soon. We have Carvana, which pretty much grew themselves into a bankruptcy. These guys went for growth over everything, and that tremendous explosive growth is what will lead them into bankruptcy. And lastly, we covered FuboTV, which has extremely negative margins and a very small subscriber base that will most likely just dissipate and go towards bigger streaming services like Netflix or YouTube. So keep in mind, if you have these 3 companies, you should seriously consider selling all 3 and just reinvest into more profitable businesses out there that will continue their growth. So that's pretty much it. Let me know if you guys have any comments or questions, and as always,